Health and wellness are more than a destination. They are a process and a journey of personal choice. Come hear from people out in the field, doing the work, bringing health and wellness to many.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today I have the pleasure to introduce Dr. Peter Goldman. He is the founder of the Zone School of Healing. And I'm delighted to have you here, mostly because I follow your work. I'm as I've helped people heal, I call myself a healing facilitator, but honestly, you really are the real deal. And I was struck, there's been a couple moments in my life when I heard you explain your work. I kind of got an inner knowingness that this was a huge fundamental piece in healing, like huge. So I began investigating it and I was drawn to learn it myself. So I just come right out and say that. But I want to say a little bit first that I've been very impressed with your school. I've been very impressed with the work and the results. Like, I do think results do matter with healing. And I do think it's a co-creative process. So I think when you are there and you are in a very high frequency, it's all about frequency, and you believe in your work and your mission, it really makes a difference. So I've been very touched with your work. Very much, Pete. So I want to ask you first about how you got into all this, because I actually don't even know. I know I did research enough that know that you have been, had wonderful teachers like Dr. Fleet and colleagues who have taught you a lot, but you are a chiropractor. I know that. Maybe you share a little more about your work.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. And let me just address one thing you said before, which I liked, about results, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how I learned what I learned. It's interesting when people talk about healing or spirituality or metaphysics or energy work or different so-called modalities of healing or different philosophies of healing. Many are very interesting. And if the person or people talking about them are eloquent in their speech, or maybe they have a lot of personal magnetism, things can sound very convincing. With that said, results are results. So I just want to agree with you on that and really point that out to your audience, that whether it's an energy work or acupuncture or chiropractic or homeopathy or medicine or reflexology or whatever it is, the bottom line is if someone has, for example, a weak immune system, they want a healthy immune system. If someone has horrible digestion, they want great digestion. If someone has migraine headaches, they want a head that feels good. If someone has panic attacks, they don't want to have panic attacks. If someone has anxiety, they want to be relaxed. So when these people with these conditions go to healers, practitioners, doctors, whatever they happen to be called, all that really matters in healing is what happens after they interact with these healers, doctors, practitioners. Does the person who had IBS now have great digestion? Well, good job. So anyway, I just wanted to say results do beat everything in healing. Now, just to be clear, I'm not talking about life. I'm not telling people what they should think is important in their life. What people think is important in their life, that's up to them. I have no comment on that whatsoever. However, in healing, the most important thing is results. So anyway, just wanted to chime in on that and agree with you. Now, as far as how I learned this, I did not grow up wanting to be a doctor or a healer. It did not even occur to me, quite frankly. I do not come from a family of doctors or healers or anything like that. I'm born and raised in New York City.
I could tell, by the way. I have family there.
I was born in Manhattan. I grew up in Brooklyn. I lived in Manhattan. I always lived in Manhattan or Brooklyn. I come from a family of business people who had, businesses, whether it was investment bankers or people who had their own business, companies. So I was kind of influenced by that. And when I went to school, undergraduate in Boston, I was an economics major. So not exactly what healers might study. And then I moved back from Boston to New York City, and I lived in New York City after college again for 4 years, and I worked in business. But I also grew up in a very naturally oriented family. So we didn't even have like a doctor. I didn't go to like an MD. I was not immunized, which is odd for the time. Because I'm born in 1967. So if you're born in 1967 and you're in New York City, everyone gets immunized, but not me. So I grew up in a naturally oriented family, and we had, like, when we went to a doctor, it was a chiropractor or a homeopath or a naturopath. We didn't deal with medical doctors, which had an influence on me, but I didn't think I would do it. I just that was an aspect of my life, but I didn't think I would actually become someone who did that. But I really gravitated towards my chiropractor, who it turns out was a direct student of Dr. Thurman Fleet, who was a great healer and chiropractor in Texas in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, was kind of his heyday. And I just thought that chiropractic could just fix anything. I didn't even understand that most of the world in current day times thought of chiropractic for like neck pain and back pain. I didn't even know that, because the chiropractor I went to, who was a student of Dr. Fleet, and I started going when I was, I think, 8 years old. He helped people heal from anything. So I observed people come to him with any condition you can imagine and heal from it. I didn't know that chiropractors outside of him were mostly doing neck and back pain. So anyway, I decided to become a chiropractor. I went to chiropractic school after 4 years after I graduated college, and I worked in New York City for those 4 years. And I went back to chiropractic school. I wanted to do what he did. I thought it was great. I did get my degree in chiropractic, but I certainly did not learn anything in chiropractic school about real healing at all. It was just a place to get my degree. So I went for 4 years, and I got my DC degree, which stands for Doctor of Chiropractic. However, during the entire 4 years, I was studying with four direct disciples of Dr. Fleet, one of them being the chiropractor that I grew up with, and 3 other guys. And in those years during school and after school too, I spent about 100 hours one-on-one with each of the 4. So that's minimum of 400 hours one-on-one, but it was over 100. So about 500 hours one-on-one I spent with all 4 of my mentors. And I learned things that I would say confidently are hard to learn anywhere else. Now, am I saying you can't learn them anywhere else? No, maybe these principles, these high-level healing principles, are taught in different places in the world. They may be, I don't know, but they're certainly not common, that's for sure. And again, going back to results, the reason I know they're not common is because the healing results that my 4 mentors got, and of course, Dr. Fleet, there's a picture of him up there, were basically unparalleled for the most part. And that is how I came to know what I know. And I'll just add one little thing to that, just briefly, is, Zone School, which you mentioned, Zone School of Healing. The zone technique is taught in Zone School. It's a part of it. And metaphysical principles of healing at a very, very high level are taught in Zone School too. I did learn a lot from my 4 mentors of the Dr. Fleet lineage, who I just talked about. However, I've studied metaphysics and healing since I was 16, regularly. So you can add up the years. I've been exposed to a lot of influences in healing and metaphysics. And I also did martial arts at a world-class level, very high level, which taught me a lot too. So Zone School is really a distillation of what I learned from the 4 mentors of the Dr. Fleet lineage and many other influences I've had in healing and metaphysics. And what I would say in kind of closing on that question is that Dr. Fleet, in addition to teaching high-level metaphysics and principles of healing, he did invent what's called zone therapy in around 1931. And I did learn zone therapy starting in 1993. And I used it quite a bit. And then over the years, I kind of shifted it a bit, and I named what I teach zone technique, which is different. And if you look at Dr. Fleet's original writings on zone therapy, what it is, and you look at what I teach in zone technique, you'll find several differences. Not to say that Dr. Fleet's not amazing. I think he's the greatest. I love him. Just pointing out the facts, which is what I teach as zone technique is different than the zone therapy that Dr. Fleet taught. So that's how I kind of came to what I learned and how I ultimately started teaching it.
Well, I can tell you that I know, just because I've been helping people heal for a long time, and I'm in your school, and I have had already amazing success with learning this technique. So, I mean, it's really incredible, because I always had success with the healings, but now it's just quicker, faster, and more complete, and it's really true. So, and it lasts. I think that's the difference. This is something that lasts. So, what I notice in my work as working with this, with just healing or energy or working with the body with nutrition or whatever, it will work. It takes more time, and it doesn't necessarily last. It's a very interesting thing. But if you do this technique, it really lasts. The connection's made, and I believe that's what healing is, and it works. So I'm really inspired by your work. I think it is, if anyone's listening and they're out there and they just want to, they've been suffering or whatever, look up a zone practitioner. Or, if you have an inspiration to learn this, I would encourage you to join Zone School. But anyway, I want to know what the mission is. Like, if you had to put your mission, because everyone has a mission, right? And I know I have a mission, but what is your mission?
It's a good question. I don't think anyone ever asked me that before, at least in an official interview. So, when I think of, I know a lot of people think of their mission and even write like a mission statement and things like that, which I think is great, by the way. I just want to be clear. I think that's fantastic. I don't really function like that. Not to say that it's not fantastic. I have nothing negative to say about it, nor do I even think anything negative about it. I think if someone has a mission and even like writes a mission statement and, maybe reads it every day and carries it out, but I don't function like that. I just get up every day and I just do the best I can.
You show up. How about that? You show up every day. But I think, like, I've known you a little bit now, and you are in your heart, and you do care about people. So there must be something higher cause, higher self of Pete that's guiding him to do this work, because it's a lot of work that you do.
Well, I will say this. I don't, and I'm not sure if this is kind of a side note, or maybe it does answer the question. I don't know, but it's kind of hard to explain this, in words. Kind of like Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, said in the Tao Te Ching. He said, the Tao that can be spoken about in words is not the Tao. So, words sometimes don't capture the essence of reality. But I'll do my best. I feel like, and again, I don't teach this because I'm not telling anyone this. People can think what they want.
Doesn't matter. It's you.
Right. But I just want to say, since you're asking, I kind of feel like when you do the right thing, like God takes care of you. Like, I kind of think that. So I just think God loves Zone School. Like, because I know, obviously there's people who've never heard of Zone School. There's healers all over the planet who do a great job. It's not like someone needs Zone School to help people, but I know the level of healing that one can achieve when they learn what they learn in Zone School is astounding. So I figure God loves Zone School, so I just get up and do my thing every day. And
that's your mission.
And I just want to add, it's really cool for me when I hear, just on that note, like when a chiropractor will say to me, and what I'm going to say to you now, I've heard too many times. I mean, I've heard hundreds of times. A chiropractor will say, "Hey, Dr. Pete," they'll tell me they've been practicing for like 30 years. So they're not new. They've been a chiropractor for 30 years, often very successfully. Then they're in Zone School for 1 year. And they'll say, like, "Man, in the last year, I've done things I never could have done. Never. I couldn't have even thought I could do. And now I do them routinely." Or I'll have other types of doctors and healers who are also very competent. They were helping people, and they will do the same thing. They did that for a certain amount of time. They joined Zone School, and they'll say, hey, Dr. Pete, I've done whatever this kind of healing was for many years. I helped a lot of people. And now in Zone School, I'm able to do things that I never could have even fathomed before. So anyway, so that's very satisfying.
I think it's so beautiful. Could I say it's sort of like the mission is that you're teaching and educating people to do this amazing work that they wouldn't have otherwise had access to. You're like a bridge between 4 or 5 masters who brought it on the planet, and you are the one that is there to make it, go all over. It's kind of like the good news. Here it is.
Well, it's interesting because when I opened Zone School, I remember it was the first week I opened Zone School in the fall of 2017. And of course, I started practicing healing in the mid 1990s. It's just that I opened Zone School in the fall of 2017. And I remember when I opened it, within the first week, we had 30 enrollments, which is quite a bit. That's a lot of enrollments in the first 4 days or whatever it was. And I remember someone said to me, wow, 30 enrollments in the first 4 days. And for some reason, just out of my mouth, without any thinking, I just said, yeah, on the way to tens of thousands. So I would like it to be a worldwide phenomenon. I think we have about 1,500 members worldwide and growing fast. So it's good.
Yeah, I believe you are going to grow fast. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the principles of it. So, for whoever's listening, they understand, because there is science behind it. I mean, it's not just here in the sky and pie in the sky. It's real stuff. Okay, so let's talk first. I think to really understand it, let's talk about the power of the mind. What would you say? I want to hear about how you feel the connection is between the mind and healing.
Okay, so let's break it up into a few parts. Let's just start with this. Concepts in the subconscious mind are manifesting in the body 24/7, 365. So if someone has an idea that they're weak, their body's disintegrating, they have a weak immune system, whatever, they will. If that's in their subconscious, the cells will manifest that 24/7. It's actually manifesting 24/7. If someone has an idea, they're strong, they're healthy, they're well, they're healing, the cells will respond to that. So when you talk about the mind and healing, one thing is concepts in the subconscious mind are manifesting all the time. And if a healer knows how to identify the concepts in the subconscious and get into the subconscious and put a new concept of healing in the subconscious, which becomes active, so the former one becomes dormant, that's very powerful. So that's number one. Number two, when a healer and a patient or client or whatever they may be called in that context have rapport, essentially when the patient has faith in the healer, there is what's called subconscious to subconscious communication, meaning what the healer expects to happen is sent from their subconscious through the ether waves into the subconscious of the patient. So the next subject of the mind is what is in the healer's subconscious mind and conscious mind, but more important, subconscious mind, about what they actually expect to happen when they interact with the patient. Now, I'll just speak to, for example, let's say there's a chiropractor and they go to chiropractic school, and in chiropractic school, they teach about something called innate, which is essentially, there's many ways to describe innate, but one way to describe it, as the founder of chiropractic described it, he said, universal intelligence is everything. It's another word for almost God or universe or energy or spirit. It's everywhere. And the part of it that's passing through your body, or someone's body, is innate intelligence, which kind of runs your body. So in chiropractic school, they might say, well, if you align someone's spine and take away nerve pressure, between nerve pressure being relieved and innate, people can heal from anything. That's what they might be taught. But they don't really have that in their subconscious or their conscious, because if a patient comes in with anything semi-significant, they're not really confident. So having a subconscious mind that actually expects healing becomes very important. The next thing that's interesting about the mind is very interesting because the conscious mind can try to at least determine the difference between fantasy and reality, but the subconscious mind does not know the difference between fantasy and reality. So that's because the subconscious mind can only reason deductively, which means it takes a series of supposed facts, and comes down to a conclusion. I'm sorry, that was reversed. I'm sorry. The subconscious mind can only reason deductively, which means it takes an idea and then a series of supposed facts flow from that idea. Whereas the conscious mind can reason deductively and inductively, and inductive reasoning means you take a series of supposed facts and come to a so-called conclusion. So, for example, I could take two people and hypnotize them both. I'm a pretty good hypnotist. Hypnotize them both, and I tell one of them they're a dog and one of them they're a cat. And you'll see they'll get in their floor and you put a bowl of milk down, the cat will be eating it. So obviously the subconscious mind can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality because they think they're a cat until I override that idea and bring them back up to the normal consciousness. So anyway, those are some of the ways. And lastly, I would say this, there's reports about, well, more than reports, it's been shown many times, like there might be an elderly woman who's driving her car and it like flips over and it falls on like a child and they pick the car up. There's reports of this. They get like this superhuman strength, which in their normal state of mind, they could never lift the car up, but something happens in their mind to let them be able to do that. Those are, tapping into some of that wisdom are some of the ways the mind affects healing.
Well, I think that's so interesting. And I do believe in my work for many years that's what we teach too. We train health and wellness coaches and we train them of the power in the subconscious. You can't change habits or behaviors without that. It just won't happen. You won't keep it. So the subconscious is 90% of what happens to us. And it's just the way it is. So if we understand that, then we do need to reprogram in this time. We really do. But I think that's really powerful and I do believe that there's something about your thoughts having a high frequency, and that my master of healing always taught me people heal with frequency. So they always go, if you hold a high frequency, whether that's in thought or whatever, they will come to that level. That's how it works. But I find that really interesting what you say, and I do believe that. Okay, now there is a connection with the zones between the brain and the spine. And I thought this was fascinating because actually, and also the brain and the cells, right? So it's the whole body, it brings it together. Can you explain that, Pete? Because I think that's fundamental.
There's an idea in chiropractic, and even if someone's not a chiropractor, it doesn't matter because this illustrates the point well. There's an idea in chiropractic that here's the brain, here's the brain, and here's the spinal cord, and here's the nerves coming out of the spine, going to every muscle, organ, tissue, cell in the body. So there's this chiropractic idea that if the bones are out of place, by the way, I'm not saying this idea is true, or I'm not saying it's not true, but there is a chiropractic idea that if the bones are out of place, then the brain is sending a signal down the cord, but because the bone's out of place, it interferes with the nerve flow. And then the nerve flows to wherever it's going, but it flows wrong. It sends like a messed up signal. So the chiropractor would try to find what bones are out of place, put them in place so this nerve flow can be unimpinged, and that signal from the brain can go from the brain down the cord to wherever it's going, but there's no impingement because the bone is now put in place. That's a chiropractic idea. It's actually called in chiropractic the safety pin cycle. That's a idea because it's kind of the analogy is like, well, if the safety pin is like undone, then it's not going to flow right. But if you put the safety pin back, then it'll flow properly. And the way you put it back is to put the bones in place because it removes any interference. That's the chiropractic idea. Of course, that idea has many, many, many problems to it. Many, many problems. That idea is ridiculous, actually. No offense to any chiropractors who are watching, but the first reason that idea is ridiculous is because if that idea was true, if that was true, which they do teach in at least the chiropractic school I went to, they said that the cause of disease are bones being out of place, putting pressure on nerves. And the solution to disease is finding the bones that are out of place and putting them back in place. So the first problem with that is if that was true, then acupuncture, homeopathy, naturopathy, energy work couldn't work because none of them are putting bones back in place, but we know they do work. So that's it's kind of a ridiculous notion. B, chiropractic was invented in 1895, which is not that long ago. So this world's been around, I think, for thousands of years, at least according to the Old Testament. I think it's been around for almost 6,000 years, according to the Old Testament. And I guess according to other scientific sources, it's been around for way longer than that. So that would imply that only the last 125 years or so, people learned how to get healthy by getting adjusted. So the whole thing is kind of ridiculous. But with that aside, the other problem, and this really addresses your question, is what if the brain is unbalanced in the first place? Even if the safety pin cycle was true, which it's not, but even if it was true, what if the brain is unbalanced? Well, what if the brain is, let's say it was partially true. Even if the brain was unbalanced in the first, let's say the brain was unbalanced in the first place, then even if you put the bones in place so the nerve can flow right, all you've done was opened up a faulty brain signal in the first place to the cells. So the zone technique says, let's see if the brain is functioning right in the first place. Because a brain that's functioning right does two things, and a brain that's functioning wrong does not do these two things. So a brain center or a brain that's functioning properly can monitor the body. The brain monitors the body. And also it can send the right signals to the body to heal and or stay healthy. But a brain that's not balanced cannot monitor the body properly, and it can't send the signals out even if it could. So the zone technique has a way through very easy occipital fiber analysis. You feel the back of the head, which is taught in zone school. You can see exactly which brain centers are healthy and which are not. And then you gently stimulate the spinal cord in order to heal the brain centers, because the body is electric. So the brain is the positive pole and the cord is the negative pole. And different parts of the positive pole can be unbalanced, which can be determined very quickly with zone technique. And then there's specific points in the spinal cord that can be stimulated to heal the brain centers in question. And again, it could be stimulated anyway. It could be stimulated with a chiropractic adjustment, with a energetic work that could even be away from the spine. It could be stimulated with gentle touch, with a massage therapist, whatever, which is really interesting. I just want to kind of add one little thing. You know, when I opened zone school, I had a bunch of chiropractors call me up, pissed off, you know. I said, why are you pissed off? They said, why are you teaching this to non-chiropractors? They didn't like that. Because of course, who's eligible to join zone school? Any doctor or healer, chiropractor, medical doctor, acupuncturist, homeopath, naturopath, energy worker, Reiki master, spiritual healer. I mean, you can't be like a plumber and join, but you know, anyone who's a doctor or healer can join. And I had some chiropractors, a few, call me up. They were pissed off. They were like, they were not even friendly. So how could you teach to non-chiropractors? Of course, I told them to fuck off. But with that said, here's the funny thing. We have in zone school so many, I mean, we have chiropractors who are real miracle workers, of course. But we have in zone school so many people who are not chiropractors, massage therapists, Reiki masters, energy workers, spiritual healers, who are getting miracle results. So we have one guy, just comes to mind. He's a massage therapist in Australia. He's a massage therapist. That's his thing. You could easily look at his healing results and put them against any chiropractor living who's not in zone school, and he will crush them. Someone came to him on a heart transplant list. And a heart transplant, imagine how bad is someone's heart when the cardiologist says they're on a heart transplant list. There's nothing else they can do. They came to this guy, he's a massage therapist. He did what he learned in zone school. He's in Mastermind, which is a high level of zone school. He did what he did. Their heart healed totally. They went back to the cardiologist. The cardiologist is totally bewildered, took them off the heart transplant list, and has confirmed that their heart is totally healthy and healed.
Yeah, it's crazy because this happened to me. I told you before we started that I normally do long distance healings. I can do that. And I got a lot better results just using the zones. I mean, it was what people would call a miraculous healing from somebody who had cardiac hypertension, apparently. So whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying it is true. It is crazy. Like, I know that people listening might say, oh my gosh, this is hard to believe, but it is happening. So you have to ask why.
I'll say about that and something you said before, because you mentioned before, which was very nice. You said two things. You said if anyone's listening and they want to get healing, and then you said if anyone's listening who is some kind of doctor, healer, or like an energy worker and wants to learn it, they can join. So let me just say, both can be done on the Zone School website, zoneschoolofhealing.com. Zoneschoolofhealing.com is the Zone School website. Number one, if someone wants to, if you're an energy worker or a doctor or a healer of any kind of healer, and you want to learn, you could just go right on the homepage of zoneschoolofhealing.com and join Zone School, and you get immediate and lifetime access to 60 hours of knowledge. You can watch it at your pace, and you'll see all the details when you join. And if someone is, a layperson and just wants some healing, they can also go to zoneschoolofhealing.com and click on directory and put in their location and maybe find someone who's certified. I just wanted to mention that for people who are interested.
I was going to ask you that, but I'm so glad you answered it anyway. So I want to hear about the zones. Just, can you go over them?
The body's divided up, at least in this way of looking at things, into 6 systems, and they're called 6 zones, which is the glandular zone, every gland in the body. The eliminative zone, which is all the eliminative organs, everything that eliminates the toxins to keep the bloodstream clean, sinuses, lungs, bronchial tubes, kidneys plural, bladder, intestines. The third zone is the nervous system, which is the brain and the spinal cord, which is the central nervous system, and of course the peripheral nerves also. The fourth zone is the digestive system, which is everything that digests and assimilates the food. Slight overlap with the eliminative system, but nonetheless, 2 different systems. The fifth is the muscle zone, which is every muscle in your body. And the 6th is the circulatory zone, which is everything that is responsible, all the apparatus in the body responsible for movement of blood. So that covers every cell in the body. There's nothing else in the body. There's no other systems in the body. So, I mean, there are other subsystems, of course, but that's, if you look at those 6 systems, that covers every cell in the body. And in that context, one could say that any disease, condition, ache or pain or whatever experienced by the human body is due to a disturbance in one or more of those 6 zones or systems. So if you can find out which of those 6 zones are not balanced and balance them, then people can heal from basically anything. Now, listen, as I've said before, but I'll say now, God forbid someone's swimming in the ocean and they get their arm bit off by a shark and they happen to survive. I would not tell someone, yeah, just come to me. I'm going to balance you out and your arm's going to grow back. I mean, I guess maybe it could, but I'm not going to say that. Right. Or if someone has a burst appendix, I would say, go to the hospital immediately and get your life saved. I'm not going to work on them. If someone needs stitches, I don't know how to give stitches, so they should go to the emergency room and get stitches. So there are those exceptions of what one might call emergency medicine. But besides that, if you know what I teach, you're confident in helping basically anyone with basically anything.
There's 2 more questions I have. One is about miracles. So in the old days, when someone had, and I know this, I'm a nurse, so when we had a spontaneous recovery, we would call it a miracle, right? True? What do you think about miracles? Like, I have a different opinion now because of science, what I've learned about quantum physics, but I'm curious about you.
Well, I think a few things. I think number one, it depends on how someone defines the word miracle, but I would say this, I would look at Jesus not as a religious figure, because obviously everyone's going to look at Jesus in their own way based on their religion. So I'm not even talking about religion. Whatever someone thinks about Jesus based on their religion, please continue to do so. It's got nothing to do with me or Zone School. With that said, we can look at Jesus as a healer also. And he said, it's not I who heal, it's the Father within. And he said, all these things I do, you can do and even greater. So if he was, raising the dead and making the blind see and making the lame walk and healing every disease under the sun, or helping heal every disease under the sun, that actually should be commonplace. I wouldn't even call it a miracle. So again, I'm not saying what is or what isn't a miracle, but I would say this, at least the way I think. This is just the way I think. I'll tell you what I think is a miracle, and I'll tell you what I think is not a miracle. I think basically anything in healing, when you apply these healing principles at the highest level that appear to be miracles, are not miracles. I've had people come to me with things that you would consider these healings wild, what happened, in a great way, but I don't consider them miracles. I consider that the very high application of healing wisdom, and of course, leading to an amazing, very gratifying, phenomenal result, but I wouldn't call it a miracle. Now, what I would call a miracle, as an example, there's probably a lot of miracles, but here's one. When Moses, in the Exodus chapter of the Old Testament, was walking toward the Red Sea, and he was being chased, and he was walking and walking, and for those who don't know, the water was, well, the way it's written, but before it parted, for those who don't know, the water was coming up, meaning he didn't walk up to the water and say, hey, part, and then it parted. That's not what happened according to how it was written. He walked up and said, he prayed for it to part. He asked God to part it, but the water was coming up. He was walking. He had so much faith that right up to his chin, and then it parted, and then he walked. I would call that a miracle.
And in the future, I believe, I do, that we will understand more of this when we understand science on a deeper level. We understand quantum physics and our thoughts and how powerful they are. It's beautiful, actually. We're going to have to be open to see things in another way. My teachers always said that intelligence was realizing you didn't know everything. And I believe that is where we have to start.
Well, I think your teachers are, if I'm not mistaken, quoting Aristotle, because Aristotle said, which I agree with your teachers, and I agree with Aristotle, that when you realize that you know nothing, that's the first step in knowing something.
Exactly. So if you're trained in medicine, for instance, or like my whole family, all doctors, and me, I was a nurse, you're trained in a certain way, but I didn't learn what I knew to help people there. I was just trained in something, so that's also interesting. Okay. And I mean, there is a point. We do need surgeons. That I agree with you. Okay. So that's about miracles, but I wonder if you could share, Pete, just one or two stories for the listener of some things that you've had happen to you.
Well, I had one guy. I mean, listen, we could be on for the next 10 hours with that, but you asked for two. I think you said two. Well, one comes to mind. This was around 1998. I had a guy come in. He was HIV positive. I don't know if he had AIDS officially. I never even asked him if he had AIDS, but he was HIV positive. He had a terribly weak immune system. He looked he looked like if I blew on him, he would just fall over. It's what he looked like. He used to get these blood tests to evaluate his immune system. I don't know what the markers were, what it was called, but he was a very dedicated patient. He would come like every week, and I kept balancing his zones. And then at some point, all his blood tests showed that his immune system was totally healed. Now, was he still HIV positive? I don't know. Probably. I don't know how that works. Like maybe he was. I never even asked him. Did he have AIDS? I don't think so. I don't think so, actually, at that point. But the bottom line was he went from this guy who looked like he was about to just like drop to like this healthy, vibrant guy who went from blood tests of a terribly compromised immune system to a totally strong immune system. So that's one.
Can I say something about that as a nurse? So we know that if you have a strong immune system, your immune system should do what it's supposed to do, which is to make sure that any virus is kept at bay. So it makes sense that he didn't have AIDS, but he just could have had that virus. But the immune system was recognizing it and saying, get rid of that thing. That's not meant to be here. So I think it's pretty cool. So what you did is you helped his immune system. and then he could handle it. That's beautiful.
Yes, thank you. And the second one that comes to mind is one that I alluded to earlier. I had a guy come in around the same time, it was like 1999, and he had a stroke about a year before he met me. And he told me that, well, he didn't tell me because he couldn't talk, but his wife told me that he was doing from the neurologist hyperbaric chamber therapy, which I don't know, presumably that helps stroke victims, I guess, I don't know. But it didn't help him because he was not any better. And he also had about a year of acupuncture, which I think is actually very good, but for whatever reason did not help him. So here he was, again, I met him a year after he had a stroke, and he had tried those things, and his arm was like completely spastic. Like one of his arms was just like it was like this. And one of his legs was completely spastic. He couldn't walk because his leg was like straight. So like, they were like, he actually was not in a wheelchair when he came to my office. People like carried him in. I don't know how he got around, but at least the day I met him, people carried him in. Like not like this, but like there was a few guys that were like under his arm. And he also couldn't talk. So he was a guy who had a stroke. He could not talk. He couldn't use his arm or leg. And it's a pretty cool story, actually, just in many aspects, but I'm going to leave all those out for the moment. And just say that, as I mentioned before, I worked on the first visit, he could use his arm like 80% in like 1 minute. And then by the third visit, his leg came back. And after about 3 months, he could talk. And I remember after a certain amount of time working with him, it was almost like he didn't have a stroke. I mean, like, he had a slight limp. You could tell when he spoke, there was something that was a little different or off from what, but he couldn't talk at all when I met him. And I remember at that time in 1999, I had like a sign-in sheet. And when you come to the office, you sign in. At the time I had one. So he used to sign in with his right hand. I mean, his handwriting was not good, but he could write. I mean, when I met him, he was walking around like this. So that was a pretty cool one.
Wow. So which zone, I'm curious, did you stimulate?
Well, I have a few answers to that question. One, I don't totally remember because we're talking about 1999, but I think that I think his first visit was zone 1. I kind of remember his glands being off. And then, he came for quite a bit. And I think a lot of the zones showed up over time. I think 5 and 3 and 1 kind of pop in my head. He was a New York mafia guy, like I was in New York at the time, because when I first graduated, I practiced in Manhattan at first, and he was like a real, like you see in the movies. He was like a real New York mobster, but he was nice to me. That's all I care about.
Well, I think it's beautiful. I mean, how amazing your work is. So I wonder, you had this comment, and I loved it, that like, I don't know if you said millions. Did you say tens of thousands or millions?
Well, that first week, I said, yeah, on the way to tens of thousands, meaning tens of thousands of healers and doctors enrolled in zone school. That would be nice.
Wouldn't it be amazing if doctors just learn this too?
We actually, it's funny. We have in zone school about maybe 25 MDs, and some of them have called me and they're amazed. They're like, they're doing things they never could have done. It's really cool. I have one in I think she's in like Africa, like in South Africa, something like that. And she called me and she's like, she was like a regular mainstream MD, and now she can do these things.
See, I think that's the future, that it's collaborative, right? We have to help each other right now where we're going. But I think it's in my heart, it's a mission. And I think you'll get there one by one. And if anyone, like Pete was saying, we'll put the links below of the zone school, and you can look up practitioners. And I just want to end with, if you have any last comments for our viewers or anything else you'd like to end with?
Well, this is what comes to mind. And I didn't have this plan, but since when you said that, it just popped in my head. So I'll mention it. I feel that a lot of the energy workers and spiritual healers and Reiki masters, and again, I'm not talking about anyone in particular, and maybe this does not apply to your audience, or maybe no one hearing this even relates to this, but I've found this in the past. So in case it does, I feel like some of them have a little bit of like an inferiority complex as a healer. Like, they know they're good, they know they can help people, they know they're working with legit stuff, but somehow against like a so-called like holistic MD or an acupuncturist, they feel a little less than. But I'll tell you right now, if you're listening to this and you're an energy worker or Reiki master or whatever, and you join Zone School, you can do what anyone can do and more.
I believe that too, because I felt it myself, and that's what I do. Oh, Pete, that's so cool. Well, I'm delighted to have met you in my life. I feel like an honor, like to meet such a master as you. And I'm sure you're gonna really bless this world with healing, which is what the world desperately needs. So thank you for your work and your time today. And I'm really delighted. Thank you. And thank you for having me as a Zone student.
My pleasure. And before we started, you said to me before we went on the air, you said, Pete, you've probably been interviewed 1,000 times. And you're right, I have been. And I just want to compliment you because this was one of my favorite ones. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Pete. God bless. Okay. I'm very grateful.
The next video is an example of a zone treatment by chiropractor Brandon. Go to www.chirobrandon.nl for more information.
Alright, let's do it right now. Let's go right around the yard. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, so we have 1, 2. 2. You drinking enough water?
Yeah, I think not.
In general, you drinking enough water?
Yes, actually, yeah.
Okay. Don't yell at me, friend. Just stop believing.
Drank too much.
Too much? Alright, so number 2 is your elimination system.
Yeah.
So we're trying to have your body get rid of whatever it needs to do. And also number 1 is just dealing with energies. So we're going to give your body some more energy, okay? How's 1?
Better.
And 2?
Still a little,
Okay.
but it's like buzzing.
Yeah, so we're just going to stimulate these areas one more time. Right here. How's 2?
Yeah, better.
All right, brother.